Good afternoon. I'm D.R. Jones, and joining me today is Judy Kaul. We're from Case Western Reserve University School of Law, and our program today is Plagiarism Detection Software. Is it all you need? Judy and I have spent hundreds of hours investigating plagiarism cases involving student papers, law review articles, and briefs. We have done our investigations using manual searches, and we have also used plagiarism detection software. There are some things we are not going to be covering, and speaking of reality, there's a lot involved in the big picture of addressing plagiarism in law school. Those issues include plagiarism prevention, policy and enforcement, why students plagiarize, and also administration of plagiarism investigation and prosecution. There are other forums where these topics are being discussed, and there are articles and materials about these subjects. We do have a handout. It is at the end of the aisles if you didn't pick it up. And it's a select bibliography, and it does have some sources that discuss some of these issues. What we are going to be covering today is that we are going to be looking, first of all, at the plagiarism detection software environment. Software is a tool, and if you're going to use a tool, you need to understand the environment in which that tool can be used. You also need to understand how the tool will be used in the context of the process within that environment. To understand whether the tool can be helpful and what kind of work it's going to supplement or replace, you need to understand both the environment, practices, and process. I'm then going to look at some general issues about the use of plagiarism detection software. And then Judy is going to review some specific plagiarism detection software and what it does, and also some possible alternatives. And finally, we'll discuss a bit about our views of the use of this software in the process of plagiarism investigation. The plagiarism detection software or systems environment. Now, sometimes you really don't need a whole lot of help to see that there's a problem with a paper. You have a paper you're reviewing, and it starts off reading sort of like a 10th grade essay. And then it shifts tone, and it begins to sound a little bit like Justice Holmes. And then the sentences get more and more complicated and longer, and suddenly dozens of footnotes appear, full of citations to cases and statutes, but curiously all those citations are all dated before 1999. And all the internal references are off. You don't need much help to see that there's a problem there. You can smell the problems. But if you are going to be confronting a student and you are going to charge a student with plagiarism, you need more than a bad smell. You need evidence. You need evidence. You need to be able to take that paper and say, here's the language in the paper, here is the source. These match. You have to have credible evidence. The consequences of being charged with plagiarism and being found to have plagiarized are very severe. And students will fight. They will deny that they have ever copied anything. They will hire a lawyer who will say that their client never copied anything. Of course, when you send the marked documents over, they may change their approach, but they will still fight. The consequences are very severe. Students can lose credit and therefore may be delayed in graduating. They can be suspended. They can be expelled. They could even lose a diploma if the plagiarism is found after they have graduated. So students will fight, and you need credible evidence. The work to find this evidence is very time-consuming. An average investigation can take 50 hours. I have spent 200 hours on one case. A lot of work involved, and certainly, again, faced with the consequences, you have to realize that you need to spend a lot of time in order to have your proof. So having some kind of tool to help in that process certainly would be really great. But I think at this point it's important to clarify what it is that we're actually trying to do. when we're doing these investigations, and therefore when we might be using this software. We talk about plagiarism detection software, and it's easy to go from saying that into saying finding plagiarism. And what you end up with is some language like this. This is a description from the Eve 2 website. Eve 2 is one of the softwares we'll be looking at today. And it says, the teacher is given a full report on each paper that contained plagiarism, including the percent of the essay plagiarized and an annotated copy of the paper showing all plagiarism highlighted. Now, this is really sort of a shorthand way of talking to say that the paper contained plagiarism. The software found plagiarism. And that's okay, except you're going from point A to Z and missing a lot of stuff in between. When Judy and I do investigations, we don't say that we are looking for plagiarism or we found plagiarism. What we're looking for is evidence of copying that would constitute plagiarism. And it's important to note this because when you start thinking about how this software can or cannot help you, you need to remember there's a lot more to the process than going from just finding copying to deciding there's plagiarism. You have to run that copying then by the wording in your honor code. And an example of that, this is the case code of conduct. Language like this is in honor codes on university campuses and in law schools. But it's only until the evidence is run against this language can you decide whether you have plagiarism. Now, it would be nice if there was some software that you could take a paper and run it through and it would find the copying and then it would run it against your honor code. And this little judge would pop up and say, guilty, and the penalty would pop up on the screen. But there isn't anything we found so far that goes through all of that. There's a lot more work involved. So you just have to remember there's a much larger process that we need to go through. That process does involve reviewing the suspect document. And what we do is we do searches. We take language within that document. We run it through Westlaw, Lexis, other databases. We run it on the web. We then do searches within web pages, within PDF documents we find. We do research and search out print sources that might be used. We meld with the document. We go through it and try to break in and find out what it is that the student has actually done. This review is very, very time-consuming. Very time-consuming. But then we also have to identify the sources, and we have to mark the document and the sources to show the matches, show paraphrasing. Then there has to be a determination by someone in the organization that there is a possible violation. And finally, there is an administrative process that the student has to go through before you have a final disposition of this case. So there's quite a bit involved here, again, from going from a suspect paper to the end of the process. It's not that from point A to plagiarism. Where the software comes in this process and where we have found it most helpful is in the review, is in breaking into the document and trying to locate possible copying and sources that were used, because that's some of the most time-consuming part of this process. And what we're doing in that part of the investigation is we're trying to identify what was copied and how that copied material was used and whether the source of that copied material was acknowledged or credited. So this is really what we're trying to do and where we could use assistance. What was copied? Students take pieces and parts of all sorts of documents, text, footnotes. They take those pieces and put them together. How are they used? They can take text and footnotes and use those as their text and footnotes. They change the internal references, and they renumber the footnotes. They piece bits of text together. They take one sentence and use that, take another sentence. They use copies text as a footnote, very nice, long analysis in their footnotes. They use textual citations as a footnote. They're usually from non-legal sources. Whether they acknowledge these sources, well, they do different things. They sometimes use quote marks, they sometimes don't. They sometimes cite the material, They sometimes cite it, but not necessarily in the same place that they are using the copy material, and they often do not use citations. So this is what we're looking for in that review, finding the copy material, how it was used, and whether there was any kind of attribution. An example. What we have when we really start looking at a paper that we're reviewing is really a tapestry. You're really taking a document and pulling it apart, just as you would take apart the pieces of a tapestry. The student has taken various pieces and parts of sources and woven them together, and you have to untangle that. And this is just one example. This is a visual, so you don't really need to read it, but you see here a page. And we have to look at that page and decide what's real here, what is the illusion. Did the student really look up all these sources that are cited? Are those the copied sources, or is there someplace else that they got this material? And as the review proceeds, what you see is this. This is the same page, and it is marked to show 5 sources that were used in this one page. And you can begin to see the pieces of the tapestry, the unraveling. See the highlighted pink? That's the text and footnotes. One sentence that's been taken from yet another source. The heading was taken from yet another source. So what emerges are the woven threads, the threads that go into making up this document that the student has put together. And what emerges then, when you untangle it all, is often something like this. A 74-page writing, 668 sentences in text, full sentences not identified as copied in whole or part, 5. And those were suspect. 17,668 words in text. Microsoft Word can count words in text. Number of words not identified as copied, 375. Those were easy to count. They were the ones not highlighted. Number of sources used, 40. This is one paper. 40 sources were used, 8 of which were not cited anywhere in the document. So you see, here's a tapestry that we have pulled apart and exposed. But finding all those pieces, and then being able to say, here's the evidence, the 40 sources, and all the pieces and parts, and the different kinds of copying that came out of those. And to come up with this result takes a lot of work. This is a document that was 99.9% copied from various sources. Certainly, having some help with this review would be very nice. To have software that you can use. You run the document through, and what it does do is it will help identify sources. It will help identify sources. So you say, well, this sounds great. If you're going to do that much work and you have a document that's that complicated in terms of the amount of copying and sources used. Because what we have to do is individually search through all these different sources. But before you really start approaching the idea of using this software, particularly on a large scale, there are some issues that you want to address. You need electronic copies to use this software. Now, Judy and I can just take the printed copy and the bad smell, and we can run with that. But software, you need the electronic copy. How many professors require submission of electronic copies of their documents? How many law reviews require an electronic copy to be deposited? We have done several cases of law review articles. What about drafts? Those are often an issue. What about a rewrite? You can get a copy of the document from the student after the fact, but then you want to make sure it is the same as the one that was submitted. You can scan the document, and then you've got OCR to deal with, and issues of whether you've tampered with the document. So you need electronic copies and a system for gathering those. The sources covered. Students use a lot of different sources, of course, in their papers. They use legal sources such as cases, statutes, secondary sources like law reviews, treatises. They use reports and briefs. They use essays, interviews, and a lot of other kinds of materials. They use non-legal sources. There are a lot of classes on law and something else, and they're often looking at non-legal sources. These sources can be accessed through a variety of methods. A lot of them are available through the internet, including law reviews and cases are available by just searching the internet. Of course, a lot of these sources are available in subscription databases like Westlaw, Lexis, B&A, other vendors have subscription databases. Also, there are non-legal databases. There are also websites that sell papers and other kinds of documents, and you will find students lifting some language from these. Does your software search these? Judy and I get on there and we have to search all these different things. We want help to search all these multiple places. Does your software search a proprietary database? If that's where your student got most of their stuff and it doesn't search that, you may have a problem. If you have a paper that's mostly web-based, then you might find most of the sources, or at least you'll find what may be the sources. There may be underlying documents like PDF documents, layers under a website that you may or may not be able to get into that are harder to find. And there's the problem of disappearance of sources. Disappearance of sources. Within 1 month, when I did an investigation, I found sources on the web and I printed them out, and at least one of them disappeared entirely within 1 month's time. I could not go back and find it. We ran one paper that was reviewed extensively a year ago, was virtually 100%. We ran it again this year. It dropped to 4% and then 2%. The reason for that is the sources have disappeared from the web, or they have been modified. The text has been modified. I've gone back and tried to find it. And what this means is timeliness. It's important that you do the investigation, you run these reports, and you will get a list of sources that you can go check. But you can't just say, oh, I got the report, I'll toss it over here, we'll look at it later. You need to get in there and get those sources because they could disappear. That is your evidence. And whether you're doing manual searches or you're using the software to help you identify these sources, you've got to get in there or they could vanish. Of course, there's also print sources, which the software will not address. Evidence of copying. There's a lot of different kinds of evidence of copying. And that's not only identical language and so forth, but also copying the format of citations. It's also, you can find copying by seeing slip-ups in internal references where they've copied and they forgot to change the references. There's echoing where you read their paper and it sounds like another paper because the structure is copied. And many of those types of evidence of copying are not so easily established through the use of this software. You have to go in and then see what it finds and then see what was copied, how is it used, and then the attribution, and look for this other evidence. The volume. How many papers do you want to review? Every paper written in the law school, you want to run that all through there? You can do that, but there's time involved in this. And again, as you're seeing, this is not an automatic process. It can help break into these papers, but it's not an automatic process. You've got to think about the amount of time. And the need for evidence. How much is enough? How much is enough? You can run this software and it'll say 30%. 30% enough, 30% copied. What if you could get 50%? Does that change how you would address the prosecution of this case? Would it change the penalty? It often would. What if it's 80%? So when do you stop, in other words? How far do you need to go in order to feel comfortable that you have a case against the student and that you're prosecuting them to the fullest extent? And what will you be allowing yourself to rely on? Is it just this report, or do you really need to go back in and follow up with that? These are issues you need to consider as you're starting to think about using this software and which software you might adopt. At this point, I'm going to turn the program over to Judy, and Judy is going to actually look at some of the major software and show you a bit of what it does. Keep some of these issues in mind as Judy is showing you examples of use of these different softwares. And just bear with us a moment.
Hello, can you hear me? Oops. You can? Everyone can hear me? Excellent. I did have a bibliography, and the bibliography includes sources that include, there are some lovely charts that compare all of the known plagiarism detection software. There's a lot of projects, special projects out there that really aren't in production mode, but you might be able to get a copy of them. There's a lot of discussion of those. But they evaluate the various systems, and so I'm not going to go into every single project or every single product that's out there. I'm going into the ones that we have found most useful for the kinds of papers that we search and the kinds of things we're looking for. Some of the systems are no longer in existence too, so you may see there are some wonderful charts that came from Luton, I think, in England, and I think some of the products that they list, though, that they liked are no longer in existence, or at least the links they had didn't work. And I want you to beware of a product called My Dropbox. It is believed to have ties to a product called Plagiaserve, also known as Edutai. And those two products, Plagiaserve and Edutai, were written up in Chronicle of Higher Education. They are suspected of uploading the papers that you submit to them, and they create a database of those papers. Well, they submit those to several different paper mills and get reimbursed for that. So try to avoid them. Although you might have, the best, you might have great results with their, product. I don't know. But I just don't think they're ethical. I've been reading a lot of the communications of the ACM, Academic Computing group of people, and so when they talk about the type of writing we do in law, it's called to them natural language text, whereas they're doing software code, software programming. There are, in case anybody wants to recommend to students that might be going to represent client software programmers as clients, there are many programs out there that can detect plagiarism in software code. A couple of them, one is named Moss and another one is named YAP, Y-A-P, Yet Another Plague. But the three that I'm going to look at, I'm going to look at more than three main products and then some other alternatives. Turnitin.com, also from an organization called plagiarism.org. Essay Verification Engine, and its current product is known as Eve 2. And then I want to mention GLAT. You'll hear a lot about this product. It's a very respected product, but it isn't really searching for plagiarism sources in the way that DR and I look for them. It's trying to test the student's knowledge of their own work. And so what the professor that designed this did was the program removes every 5th word from the student's paper. And then the student has to sit down with the product and fill in the blanks for the missing words. And then it processes how long did it take for the student to reply to the missing blanks, to try, and how accurate were their answers, to try to get a determination of how well they knew their own work. So it's an interesting product, but it won't help what DR and I have to do. There's another product that's a shareware product, and I thought I should mention it. I haven't had much success with it, but just usually because when I'm working on one of these, I don't have the time to play with it, but it gets rave reviews, and I know that eventually I'll figure out how to use it properly. I've been trying to figure out how to get LexisNexis CheckCite to tell me what's plagiarized, and I just in my bones feel that there is a way that I can make this do this. I can put quotes around something or put in some kind, but then you can't use that as evidence because you doctored the version that you're running through CiteCheck. But I just feel there's a way I can make it tell me, yes, this is the quote, these are the quotes that are missing. But I'll show you what kind of report you can get. I think it jumped ahead. Basically, Turnitin is the first product I want to talk about. Turnitin is based out of UC Berkeley, and they get a lot of press. They're written up in Chronicle of Higher Education all the time. They were recently on an ABC program. They're used in high schools, higher education, graduate schools. They are used worldwide. They have a lot of respect in the industry, and they're constantly improving what they do. What their search engine basically does is chunk your paper into 8-word strings and then searches currently against 3 main databases of content: that a currently extensively archived copy of all the publicly accessible internet pages and term paper mills, approximately 2 billion pages. They also have a database subscription that they can search against with ABI Inform, Periodical Abstracts, Business, Dateline, which are ProQuest databases. And they have subscriptions to tens of thousands of electronic books. And they also search against every student paper ever submitted to them, because your paper is not residing on your website or your site anywhere. It is residing on Turnitin's website. You submit it to them. But it is only visible with your permission to somebody else. It can search against it, but you'll see, I'll show you an example. And but it can search against every paper that's been submitted. So if there's fraternities out there that have a constant run of, cycle of papers that they give to each other, eventually they'll maybe show up and Turnitin, and you'll be able to nail the people. And in the literature, a lot of these articles say that it's not searching PDFs, and at one time they couldn't. But last night I was running some reports, and it pulled up a PDF. So I believe that it is now running PDFs in the current version. It can search through PDF level. And it is known for its authenticate algorithm, which is able to detect embedded paragraphs from multiple sources. And what it does, it tells you that it makes a fingerprint of the student paper that you have submitted to it and runs it against the databases. And it yields 2 reports: a printable report that is linear, and it's in 2 sections. A list of all your hits, of all the sources that it thinks it found something in, and then the highlighted student's paper with the suspected areas. Then there's the originality report, which is divided into 3 sections, same first 2 sections, but then there's the option to then compare the student paper to the original source, and you'll see that too in a minute. Then they also, at that time, at the time you're getting your report, you get a percentage of the suspected plagiarism, and that little chart is color-coded. So if you decide that you're going to run all the notes submitted for a particular journal, or you're going to run all the notes in a seminar or papers written for a seminar course, you can run them all into the system. You can submit them simultaneously and then get a report back, and you can say, okay, I just want to look at the ones that are red-coded. There are some limitations and some issues. Once submitted, a paper is only reported as a paper in the database. In other words, when we tried to run the paper we did last year, and we got our trial Turnitin subscription this week, we found that we couldn't pull up a report of all those 40 sources that it found last year. We had a demo version last year, or a version that one of our instructors has an individual subscription. But say the student went to another law school after he got suspended from ours and tried to use that paper again, it'll show up that it existed as a paper before, but it doesn't show up all those plagiarism, those lifted sections, those copied sections, those problem areas. I don't want to call it plagiarism. That's not my job to interpret whether that's plagiarism. Another problem is that it only reports for DR and I anyhow. I mean, this isn't a bad thing. It reports the first several relevant hits that it comes to. In other words, if it finds a case, it'll report the first 4 times it finds that case. And you'll have 4 different websites to choose from, which are all linking to that case. But they may not be the actual official source for reporting that case. So, you know, it's just not all there. Presently, it does not search LexisNexis, Westlaw, and Hein online, though there is the possibility that it could. And it would really have great value for the law school if we could get that. And also, I want to say B&A also. We subscribe to B&A, so that would be very helpful for us. If they could do that, so if everyone would remember when they go to AALL or their professional meetings, that, you know, that would be a useful thing if LexisNexis, Westlaw, and Hein Online and B&A would think about a service like this, or even think about, you know, partnering somehow with Turnitin or a company like Turnitin. The other product I'm going to show you is Eve 2. The user, me, I would be the user, the instructor or the assistant, the support staff that is running the investigation, identifies a file from your local system. Eve 2 strips the formatting and turns it into plain text. And using advanced, that's the other thing, Turnitin can use a variety of formats, Word, WordPerfect, text, RTF, but Eve 2 can only turn it into plain text. Then it uses what it calls advanced searching tools, but it doesn't really tell us much about what they are or how it uses them, to match potential sources from the internet. It searches term paper mills, and not much more information is coming from them about how they do it. Problem with it is that it seems to ignore punctuation, and that results in a lot of false hits because it's actually picking up stuff that has got footnotes, and you can see it right there in the plain text, and it's kind of annoying that you have to go through all that if you've got a lot of markup material. But you do get a report back. The report indicates the percentage of suspected plagiarism. And last year when we ran the sample that DR was talking about, we got 100%, we got 99%, or 100% reports when we ran that. but you get varying results, and I can't find anyone who can explain it, except that maybe websites are down, or the material comes and goes off the websites. I mean, there's a lot, that would explain a lot. But to have it vary, when I ran the report, I was running it again last night to see, it came back with even less percentage of, it's 100% plagiarized, but it came back with 0.19% plagiarized. So none of those sources are left on the web anymore, or at least not being accessed by Eve 2. That may have changed. And I wrote them and asked them, and you don't get much support. With Turnitin, you get a lot of support. So if you run, they recommend in one of these articles in the bibliography, run through Eve 2 3 times in a row, you'll get a different percentage of suspected plagiarism, but at least you'll, I don't know. That's what they recommend you do when you use it. It is low cost. It's $19.99 plus you can get a site license. I think it's for $200. Low cost. If you have a one-time paper, $19.99 is worth it. If you want to know quickly, you download it and away you go. Even Turnitin recommends this product. They don't have a formal partnership with them, but they will recommend it for small jobs. It generates the report in RTF for you, and it saves it automatically to your hard drive, and I like that feature. Okay, this got out of order. I knew there was something else for Turnitin. Turnitin's pricing, site license for what they call their plagiarism prevention package. For a single campus institution, which is what they would consider a law school, for 12 months, you pay $500 for the annual licensing fee and 60 cents per student, and we have 700 students, and so we fall within the $1,100 minimum. Unlimited class, that covers unlimited classes and instructors, so you could set it up so that your instructors are entering the reports, or the students are entering the reports. And I'll show you that in a minute. Or you can have, if the instructors aren't, you can also set it up so that an administrator or a TA or support staff are entering reports. And that also covers unlimited originality reports back to you and an administrator, or two administrators. And the problem is they actually give wonderful support while you're investigating the product. I'm not so sure what it's like afterwards, because then you have to pay extra for extended help desk for faculty via email only, or for extended help desk for faculty and students if you're going where you want the students to submit their own papers. We'd probably have to have that service if we were having students submit papers. That's an extra $330. Eve 2, back to Eve 2, sorry about that. Time-consuming search, another limitation is the time-consuming search runs from your own computer. We did this. It yields a 2-part report, the list of sources, it's linear, and a highlighted student paper. But then you can click on a comparison option button to see a side-by-side report. But when you click on that, it goes away to pull up that source off the internet, and it takes forever. So it's a very long process to see it. You can use it interactively, and it's very useful when you can see it that way, but it's time-consuming. Another product I looked at is with CopyFind, WCopyFind. It's based out of University of Virginia. It gets a lot of good reports. It's a very simple program, but it's not searching for you. It recommends that you search in Google and come up with suspected documents, and then it runs a report that compares those documents. The good thing is it's shareware. And the real problem is that you still are stuck with the job of finding the sources, but I'm thinking I might start using it more, now that I understand it a little more, to when I do find the sources that I'm sure things are picked up from, and then I'm going to use it to run the comparisons. LexisNexis as an alternative plagiarism detection system You can get clues that quotation marks are missing because you'll get these reports back that say no quotes. And I called LexisNexis and I asked the site check expert about that. And they were reluctant to provide any on the phone, in-person type of support for it. But they did say, oh yes, that means that there's something on that page. But you don't get a sample report back with your quick cite, your keyword in context kind of report. That seems to only work with cases. You get a little sample report back. For law review articles, you only get the note that it was no quotes. There were no quotes. There was a citation on that page. There was something that was quoted on that page but doesn't have quotation marks. It tells you what page number, so that's useful. And it only seems the report, no, I said that. Okay, so now we're going to go to the demos. And hope I didn't get timed out of this. Okay, this is my Turnitin. Okay, go back one. This is what you see when you come in. It's got a lot of plagiarism prevention information. They have a lot of other alternative services that they offer, too, to try to help you prevent plagiarism. However, we're not going to cover those. They have gradebook stuff and all sorts of tools, too, that professors might be interested in. But we're not going to focus on that. And when I log in, as an instructor, I can log in as an administrator too. But when I log in as an instructor, this is what I get. I have created a class called CALI Demo. I enter the class. I get my assignments are listed here. So I would have to, one of the things I have to do when I'm creating, I have to create an assignment. And then once it does that, students or you or your assistant can submit papers to that assignment. And then you can go in and look at your various assignments. There we go. And you get an inbox for your assignment. And these are two that I ran. And you'll notice, where's the... Up here is the show these papers. This is the percentage of suspected plagiarism. So I got a green report and I got a red report. And these were both papers that were that DR and I had both marked up and are known to have serious issues. So then I can click on my report, and this is what I get. This is the linear report, the first report. It comes up with 17% matching text, all color-coded. I can click on these websites and go look and see what they are. Oops, where did I hit? There it is. Okay, I see what I did. And at the end of it is my student paper. And you can scroll down and see your highlighted text with the problem areas. Now it found, actually I found this, most of the materials I found in this paper were on Lexis and Westlaw, and a couple of business databases. But it found some lovely pending legislation in here that I could have found if I had had Turnitin when I ran this. So that would have been a little extra. And maybe it would have been enough to, another 17% maybe would have changed how they prosecuted the student. And it has different colors for the different, as many as you can now with 40. you run out of colors, even, because you just can't tell that much difference between the different colors. So 40, I was hoping I could show you 40, but I'll show you why we couldn't in a minute. Okay, so that's the originality report for that paper, or the first linear report. And then there's the side-by-side version. And now you see that you have tabs across the top. And this is the student paper here. And there are tabs across the top that talk about how much plagiarism in each of the tabs. And you can click on those. And it will take you to those source documents. So on the right are the source documents. And as you scroll through, the part that matches is highlighted. Pretty simple, very nice. Saves, is very helpful and gives you clues. Now, sometimes it is not the original source, though. For example, we were looking at a website that had a lot of promotional material and on the issue, on the topic, and then there were these further PDFs lower down, and they had the same text that was in the promotional part or the brochure part of the website. They had some of that same text embedded in this lengthy PDF paper that was in there, and it missed that at that time last year. And we can't tell if it would have picked it up this year or not. So that's a problem with it. Any questions while I get this screen open? I'm going to close this one and show you this red report. This is the note from last year. Uh-oh. And it's all in red, the entire report. And the reason is because this paper was submitted to Case Western Reserve in 2002. And it's the professor, this was one of our professor who has his own individual subscription to Turnitin presently, and he ran that paper for us last year. So it is now in their database of student papers, and we cannot see what's plagiarized in the paper. All they think is that it came from another student paper, because I didn't put the student's name. And I don't think we had the student's name when we ran it last year either. Maybe. Yeah, I haven't played around with it enough. That's a good idea. I was thinking, too, the other thing would be if that's a reason to go ahead and report the student names. Now, there's a privacy issue that I was going to have some slides on, but I took those out. There have been cases where students have had hearings. I know that it's been at their university level. I don't know if it's gone to the courts yet, but it's gone to their university courts, hearing examiners or whatever, and it's overturned the results of their prosecution because they felt that it was invasion of their privacy to submit their work to this company in California, even though it's a not-for-profit company, I think. So there are a lot of privacy issues. So I left my students' names out of these. But I think maybe it can tell by the student name and so then you could maybe trick it. I don't know, if you did distinguish and then tell it a different student's name. I don't know. I have no idea. But I think if you change the title or something, maybe. But I think it's still going to come back with this text because it's the exact structure of the previous paper. It's the exact fingerprint of the previous paper, so it's going to come back with it. But you're right, there's got to be some ways you could play with it. And you can set preferences. And also, it has some false hits sometimes where you get, it didn't pick up the punctuation or the block quote that was the main thing. It had problems with block quotes. Okay. So it didn't pick up the block quotes. And so you can tell the system, oh, well, rerun that reanalyze and exclude, and you can check this box, and it'll rerun the report. But what happens is you submit your paper, you go away and come back a few minutes later, I think about an hour for the longer papers, and it'll be in your inbox. The reports will be there. They say within 24 hours. Now the next, I have to move on real quick to Eve 2. Oops, I gotta go back to the main page. Eve 2 is software that runs off of your local hard drive. So you download the software and it comes up on your screen. You tell it, you just follow along and it instructs you through the process. You click on Add a File and pick a note to add. And then you click Next, and it goes away and starts searching. And then you tell it, it asks you, how do you want to do it? Medium, full, quick, call off the hounds when 80% of the essay has been determined to be plagiarized. They have some advanced setup options. We don't have proxy server. We have VPN on our campus, so this is no help to us. But they have proxy server availability if you have a proxy server, and then it can search some subscription databases for you. So if we tell it full medium is what it defaults to, just for now. We usually do full strength because we need to know, DRR and I need to know as much as we can find. And then tell it to go, and it starts checking. And this is very long. We're not going to even get a report. So, but it starts telling you that it found 731, it divided up the paper into 1,731 chunks, and it's got 74 suspects so far. And then when I'll show you a report. Eve 2, whoops. Oh, here it is. It comes back with a .eve extension, automatically puts this report in your, I don't know if you can see it, but you get a plagiarism report automatically, and it gives you, I'll scroll down a little bit, and then, oops. It gives you the URLs. And they're kind of messed up right now on this screen. But those are URLs. You could run those through your machine. Now, when you're looking at the report in Eve 2, they're actually hot, and you can click on them. You can also get a comparison between the student paper and the source. But then that takes another 20 minutes for it to make that connection and do the combination. You have to do each one singly. So, oops.
Turnitin or you choose similar sources, or is it two different sources?
Similar sources. I've had it come up with House of Cheats and term paper mill papers. So I know that it's searching similar sources, and they're just internet sources. There are no, other than House of Cheats, which and the term paper mills that it must have access to, it does not come up with subscription databases. It has a little bit of help. It's got a frequently asked questions. It's got some information on its website, but I find the documentation and the support is iffy. But we use it a lot. So, but we just take it with a grain of salt that we're not going to get exactly. We're just going to get signals. We're going to get some clues. And finally, I'll just quickly show you with CopyFind, this is, whoops, what it looks like. I don't have a report to show you because I can never get it to work. But you get a lot of options. Basically, you put your student paper there. You just right-click on this box, find your student paper, browse for documents, and find it. and put it, the link to it there, and then you put your suspected files in the lower database, or in the lower box, and then you have options that, comparison rules that you can set up. You can set up also, eventually, you can make your own database of word maps and things that are specific to your area and stuff that you might want it to look for unique phrases or something, and save that to your hard drive. It's got a lot of nice features. And then you run your report, and it comes back with a color-coded report that tells you how much they matched. So I'm looking forward to using it when I have known suspects in the future. And I thought I had my my Lexis report open. I may have shut it.
What you could see here is, I think you could see there is value in this in identifying sources, as I was discussing earlier in the presentation, that the way that this software can be very helpful is in identifying potential sources in their review process. But then you really do have to go in and start matching up sources. And if we have to say, is it all you need? No, it isn't. Sometimes it's deterrence just to mention to students that their paper is being run.
Yeah.
But we have never seen these reports as something we would just rely on. Here's a report, so therefore we have evidence. We have to go in and track down these sources and see what's found, and then often do further investigation to see again if we have the exact match. It's so important to have that evidence. We have some time for questions too. Yes?
Two questions. Number one, are you running every student paper through?
No.
No.
Just
No.
the suspects?
Right.
Right. The ones that are brought to us.
Brought to us. Now, one of our journals is running every note through, and they've been bringing them to me.
Not a bad idea, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Second question is, does this pick up things like chart?
No. Not that I've experienced.
And
In fact, we had that one that had a chart. Yes, it did. It picked up the earlier draft. It depends.
Sometimes we have
how
found
it's
that when you're
laid
talking
out.
about data and tables, the question was, is it going to pick up data and tables? And sometimes we've seen it do that, but other times not. And a lot of that just depends on where the source, if it's on the internet, and whether it can pick up a matching. If there's a lot of text in it, that it can match. But if it's just like a chart, it's iffy. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions?
Any question?
Yeah.
Yes.
You mentioned you have to do further investigation. What type of investigation do you do?
Oh, we use Invisible Web, we use Google, we use at least 3 search engines, all the web, Tioma, Google. We use Lexis and Westlaw extensively. Our searches, our own suspect searches. We look for stylistic changes. We look for clues. I'll go back to my PowerPoint.
And then what we do, if you saw that marked document, we actually then go through and mark the document and highlight the text and mark the source as well, so you can lay them side by side. And then we write in, this language here is from this page. And we use color copiers now to make extra copies of those. But what we then do is we present that. We are asked to investigate the case. We do this research, and then we give the marked document and sometimes a written report saying this is what we found. That goes to an administrator who then has to decide what to do with the student. So we're doing the research, like a detective does the investigation and then presents the evidence, and that goes to someone who will then decide how to prosecute. So.
Right. And we're looking for clues, and there's an article on the bibliography by Cloth, and he has the best list I've seen of all the different clues you should look for when you're reading a student paper. Now, he's writing it from the perspective of a programmer, because this is what the programmers are trying to teach their programs to look for. But for instance, long sequences of common text unattributed, as you would imagine, But then the order of the presentation of the facts, the structure, the amount of similarity, the sudden incoherence of text, those are the things you're looking for. Abrupt stylistic changes, major format changes. You can see them when they change from one citation format to another citation format on the same page of footnotes, or when they have little marks or signals left over from downloading from a service like Lexis or Westlaw. There might be little, or from something, they leave all sorts of little clues. The font changes sizes, there's all sorts of weirdnesses that happen. The line spacing between you're looking at those visually yourself, because right now I don't know that there's, fingerprinting in Turnitin may be doing some of that.
Yeah, all these clues and so forth, this is part of what we do. And again, as a conclusion, I think this software is useful. It is helpful to break into these papers, but because of the need to have really good, strong, credible evidence, you really have to go in and look at what's found and then do further investigation. So we recommend trying this out, but remember those issues I raised as well as to how you might end up using this. Yes?
Right.
Right.
That's right.
You did mention with Turnitin that it does not currently search Lexis, Westlaw, or Pine Online.
Right.
Do you know if there's been any formal?
I know they want to get subscriptions like that, but I don't know the status of any such.
You all in your extensive research
Oh yes, we've talked to Turnitin about it.
Yeah, that's why we encourage you, if you're
Yeah.
working with either Turnitin or these other sources, that they can be collaborative.
Yeah.
But at this point, there's no
formal.
announcement that they are going to partner.
Yeah, we
but
just know they're interested.
Yeah,
Yes.
sure.
I'm just curious, do you give students a chance?
The professors they always recommend that you never see a student alone, so when they have one of these results, they take the student into their office. I'm not exactly sure what their standards for, do they do all of that. I know that they see them with two people, like an associate dean and the professor will talk to the student.
They do actually do that. It depends on the case. Often they will. They do talk to the student, but a lot of times the student's already gotten a lawyer. I mean, it really goes that far. But there are also a lot of cases that maybe even don't get to us.
Right, right.
Where the professor has found what they think is enough. They do some of their own research, and they talk to the student.
Oh, sure, there's a lot of
so
that.
So a lot of these are diffused fairly quickly.
Right.
Exactly.
And in fact, the journals, I know, they just get the reports, and then they let me know if they want any of them run further.
Right.
Yes. Oh yeah, that's right. We've had to do it. Yep. You have to get everything they've done, and everything they've done comes back, that it has some problems.
And that's where, again, disappearance of sources, getting electronic copies can be an issue. They often sometimes have to write a second paper, and they will do the same thing in the second paper.
They'll do the same thing.
It's like a second paper.
It's like a cry for help.
Yeah. It could turn into a long-term, extensive review. Yes.
I'm currently analyzing a student paper where paraphrasing is taken to a very high
Yeah. They're more creative,
almost no instance of three consecutive words are actually copied. Words just greatly changed. That's what paper for one of these.
the Turnitin, the one that DR did the major work on last year with the 100% plagiarism, Turnitin came up with a very good report, but it wasn't totally accurate. And again, because it's
And that did
only
not have a
looking.
lot of paraphrasing, though.
No, yeah. We had that with the religion one.
There are
Yeah.
some, and it's mixed results when
Yeah.
you've got, it depends on how much, again, it's searching word strings. So if it could at least pick up some of that, but it's not as
Yeah.
successful with, as you call it, high art paraphrasing. And,
Well, we've had some of those, though, where the first half of the sentence is from one document and the other is from another source. The other half is from another source. And every other sentence is like that. And they spend more time putting it together than if they just did the research and wrote their own paper.
But it is hard. You can get some breaks into the sources when they have paraphrasing if there's enough there.
That's right.
But it's not very good if they've got enough change that you're going to lose that sequence.
Right. And on for instance, on the comparison, the with copy find might be able to help you, because you could compare the two papers that you think it's coming from. You could compare that through that service. The URL is on the bibliography, I think, or our slides are going to be posted on the CALI site, and the URLs in that. And I plan on, when I have some known products, I'm going to run it through that.
And
let it
that
do the
would be
sorting.